The mesh sculpting mode in Polybrush is activated by clicking the top left button in the mode toolbar. Click and drag on the mesh to sculpt upwards and outwards, or hold Shift to push inward. As mentioned in the brush settings tutorial, you can hold Control and use the scroll wheel to change the brush size. Hold Control and Shift to change the strength, which will change how much of a up or down effect the sculpting brush will apply. And just hold Shift to change the fall off or the inner radius. As with all modes, you can also use the brush mirroring tools if you like to paint with multiple brushes at a time or create symmetry. Be sure to take a look at the brush mirroring tutorial if you'd like to learn more about that. In this mode, you also have the mode-specific push-pull or sculpt settings. Number one would be ignore open edges. So let's create something a little simpler. To show how this works, I'm just going to create a standard plane and begin sculpting on this. With ignore open edges turned on, the sculpting brush will completely ignore open edges. So this can be very useful if you have an object where you don't want the edges to be affected by the sculpting. On the other hand, with ignore edges turned off, now it's going to affect those edges regardless. Moving back to the main demo object, let's take a look at the other settings for sculpting mode. The brush normal is sticky option, when turned off, will allow the brush to continually pick new directions to move the vertices. So as you can see, as I'm moving the brush around, it will continue to pick what it thinks is the best direction based on the normals or direction of whichever face the brush or cursor is currently hovering over. However, with this turned on, now the brush will stick with whichever direction it picks from the start. So if I start here and begin to move the brush around, you can see that no matter where the brush is or the surface normal that it's currently on, it keeps the direction that it started with until you let go. This can be especially useful for smoothing or flattening out areas to a plane. Below that option, you have the direction option. Let's quick undo those edits. We have a simpler object here again. So you can choose from a few directional options: brush normal, vertex normal, global up, global right, and global forward. So in brush normal mode, as we saw, it's going to push and move vertices, pull as well. If you're holding Shift, remember, that will go inward. And that's all based on the brush normal. However, I can change that to vertex normal, and then each vertex is going to move in its own direction. So this can lead to some interesting effects and will often create ballooning or pinching as well. Let's undo those edits again. And looking further down, we have up, right, and forward, which are pretty much exactly as they sound. So in up mode, it's simply going to move vertices up. And right and forward are the same, of course. And holding Shift is going to do the opposite. Just like so. Normally, you'll probably want to keep this simply on brush normal, as that's the most useful and standard sculpting mode. At the very bottom of the mode specific settings, you have the brush effect. And this is basically a multiplier that acts on the strength while sculpting. So for example, if I have a very large mesh where I need to move and push vertices by at least 10 meters at a time, I could change this number to 10. It's going to multiply that on top of the strength. So in this case, with a very small mesh, that would move very quickly. Or if I lowered it just to 1 in this case, it's going to move much more slowly, since it's only multiplying the strength by 1. So that's the basics for sculpting. Remember, you can use this on any mesh at all, and also on ProBuilder created meshes, which is a great way to be able to build, edit, change, and then sculpt to create really interesting and unique meshes. Thanks for watching this tutorial, and hopefully we'll see you in the other tutorials for the sculpting, vertex color painting, and texturing modes.